Okay. The question for today's episode is, why did I build all of this and still feel empty? I can think over the course of my career, so many things that I believe to be true that now that I'm in my 40s, I realize are really untrue. Like, I believed that work had to be incredibly hard. I believed that it was just sometimes what you had to do. You just had to stick it out. You just had to, fight through all the bad days. And I lived with a lot of force energy. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but if you were pursuing something that I believe, or while I was pursuing things that were not necessarily my dreams or, my definition of success, but when I was living by other people's definition of success, then it always felt like I was forcing things, that I just had to put my head down and work hard. And maybe that resonates a little bit more with you, that this is just part of the process, that you were just pretty miserable. It sounds so ridiculous to say out loud now, that you were just pretty miserable along the way. But hey, once you got to that destination, once you got to the prize, then you would be happy. Then you would have all the rewards, you would get to reap all of the feelings of success and happiness that you were without over the course of that entire time while you were sacrificing and while you were killing yourself to get to the prize. So I'm sure that there are a lot of you out there that believe that exact same thing because, that thought is pretty rampant in society. And I think that women are often taught to believe that too, because they're told or we're fed all of these ideas that, once you have kids, once you, are trying to make it all work, it's just really, really, really hard. And, one thing that I wanted to really address in this episode is, what if it didn't have to be? What if you could actually find happiness in the process and not in the prize? So the older I've gotten, the more I have realized that to be true, is that happiness is the result of what you get to experience day in, day out during the process of the seeking. And what I mean by that is when you're in pursuit of that destination, right? That thing that you want to accomplish. And most of the time it's about who you get to become along the way. And when you are focused so much more on the process than the prize, then you get to experience happiness today. It's shocking. And that what we're actually seeking is a sense of flow. And by that, I mean, you're doing things that light you up. You're doing things that you feel like use your unique gifts and talents. That, yes, they are challenging. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the process should feel easy. It's going to feel uncomfortable. But like we talked about in the last episode, right, we're not swinging the pendulum always to zero and saying, it can either be hard or it can be easy. It's not. It can be and both. It can be, challenging and uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be miserable, right? So those are two very different things. I want you to feel that feeling of challenging yourself because that's where the growth comes in along the way. And that's actually the fun of the process, shockingly. Is your ability to look at the challenges, the things that scare the shit out of you, and show up and try to do them anyway. And then when you do them and you do them messy and not perfect, just like I'm trying to do this, because it scares the shit out of me, but it lights you up because you realize oh, wow, I'm doing something today. Yesterday, I didn't think I could do. And that feeling of accomplishment, even if it's just a little bit of moving the needle in the direction of becoming the version of yourself that you want to be, that is where the happiness comes in, not at the destination, not it is not to be withheld from you throughout that process until you get to the prize. And if you feel that, to me, what I know now that I wish I knew when I was 25 is that if you do feel that, then it's probably because something is off. And you can go back to the first episode and listen about defining your own definition of success or your own destination versus following this one that just feels off and just continuing down the path, hoping that one day it gets better. Lord knows that's what I did. And oh my gosh, I was so committed to believing that happiness only came when you got the prize and this idea that work was just misery and discomfort and frustration until you got to the prize, that I repeated this pattern over and over and over again. So you can see my operating system is deeply entrenched in this belief because even when I tried to change it, even when I thought, oh, I'm pursuing something for myself, I still repeated it. Let me give you an example. So I've talked a lot about practicing law and really feeling like that was just the pursuit of someone else's dream and an idea of what success looked like. And so I left that. But then I started running a sales team, essentially. And in that, it really took hold, all of that part within me that said, hey, forget the process. It's all about the prize, right? It's all about the recognition of achieving these end of month goals, right? Where you stand in, the grand scheme of the numbers of everyone else in the community. It's about where you stand at the end of the year. And if you're in the top 10 or the top 3 out of 40,000, just to put it in perspective, that's what I was wanting to achieve. If you're in the top 3 or the top 10, then you're successful. And if you are not, you are lazy, which was one of my greatest fears. Like, the other end of the spectrum was if I didn't hit those milestones, not only was I not going to be happy, I would be defined as someone that was a quitter and lazy. And that was my old programming telling me that all the time. Always living in the zeros and the tens, the either and or. There was no idea of and both, that I could be successful and I could take a pause, that I could be successful, and choose not to pursue these ridiculous prizes month in, month out. But that was not what my operating system told me. So I found myself pursuing this external validation, right? Wanting other people to say to me over and over and over again, wow, you're doing such an amazing job. You're so good at what you do. And so I ran myself ragged. I mean, absolutely ragged. I was miserable now that I look back on it. But again, I thought this is just part of the process to get to the prize. And so I found myself kind of 3 years later in that sales career, looking back and saying, wait a minute, here I am again, trying to please other people, trying to get them to say I'm good enough. Is this even what I want to be doing? Is this really developing who I am? Or am I just kind of running this rat race? It really encompasses that idea of, the arrival fallacy. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, but psychologists call it, the arrival fallacy because we falsely believe that when we arrive, that we will then feel happiness, right? That, yes, I will feel great when it's over. I will feel so great when we close on the house. I will feel so great when, this part or this chapter of my life is done. And when I realize now, back, gosh, in my 20s and 30s, I was spending all of my time saying that, like, oh, when this is over. But then I just start the process all over again. Yes, that thing was over. Great. I got to experience the high of completing it for about 48 hours. And then it was like a drug that I had to feed all over again. So, I continued to pursue that again and again and again, always finding myself back in the place of feeling empty and feeling like I wasn't fulfilled. And so after doing this in multiple careers over many, many years, right? Practicing law, running a sales team, then I ran a couple of companies after that. I just want you to get an idea of how dedicated I was to proving to everyone else that I was enough and that I was worthwhile versus following my own intuition, right? I was just thinking about the prize and never about how I felt in the process of life every day. I didn't actually understand, now that I'm even thinking about it, I didn't understand that life could feel good day in, day out. God, kind of realizing that right now. That is sad. That makes me sad. I'm just thinking that how much I believed and how deeply I believed that life had to be hard. And that if you were looking for the easy, then you were looking for like the Staples easy button. And that was cheating. And that, if you really wanted to get to the mountaintop, man, it was just going to be hard. But I think let's unpack for a second what it means and what we should look at as hard. Hard in the process now, I realize, is what's hard is continuing to challenge yourself. What's hard is that you face things that scare you and you do them anyway. What's hard is that you may not believe that other people are going to think what you're doing is worthwhile, and yet you follow your own intuition anyway. To me, today, what I certainly wish I knew back then was that those are the things that I should have looked for as hard experiences, not my previous definition of what hard work looked like. Actually, now I remember I did an entire speech a few years ago all about the definition of hard work versus working hard. And hard work is when you are actually doing things that are probably against the grain of who you are. Like, hard work is that stuff that at the end of the day leaves you completely depleted, exhausted, frustrated, bitter, resentful. Maybe not every day, again, but most days. It leaves you with things like the Sunday scaries. God, I used to have that all the time. It leaves you with things like, dreading Monday or even dreading Wednesday. All the time I would be thinking to myself, like, oh, what does the next day bring that I'm dreading? What's the next day bring that I don't want to do? And then I would, get my old critic and inner critic involved, and it would be like, yes, and you are going to do it, damn right, because you want to get to the mountaintop. You want to become successful. And that is what we are doing, okay? Get yourself together. But what's hysterical is that all of those actually should have been signs to me all along of, hey, this is probably not what you should be spending your entire life doing if it makes you feel that way. And not that I would quit right then, but that is the point where I should have re-examined. That's the point where I should have asked myself, is this using my unique talents and gifts? And is this allowing me to become the best version of myself that I can possibly be in the process? Or again, am I only in the pursuit of a prize? Because at the end of the day, I was. And if I couldn't say that I was falling in love with the process or that I was proud of who I was becoming in the process, I wasn't becoming anything, to be honest. I was just doing the same exact thing over and over and over and over again. No wonder I felt bitter and resentful, right? I would just look at my calendar, dread the things, get up and force myself to do it again. And that is not living. And to me, that is just existing. And that is not at all how I want to live my life. And it's not how I want you to live your life. Now, there were a lot of other things that were also keeping me going on that, path that other people defined for me. And one of them was certainly guilt. Guilt for not feeling like I am grateful for all I did have. I had a lot of clients along the way in my coaching practice that felt this exact same way. And I can remember so many of them coming to me and with this same, internal dialogue and frustration saying, gosh, I'm not happy where I am. I don't know why I'm not, right? Now we can think through it's because they were only hanging on to the prize and not enjoying the process. Or maybe they were on the pursuit of someone else's journey to success and not their own. But I don't think I can change anything. I don't think that I can pursue, right, the creative aspect of myself. Maybe it's art or interior design or, anything like that, because I have this great job. I've been doing well. And now how can I leave that when I've been given this gift to be able to do these things and my family depends on that? And, how can I walk away from that? I have so much more than other people get. It feels wrong of me. And, I think that we all need to talk about that this idea that you can feel like you have everything, but then you can also feel empty too. And we need to talk about it because boy, does that come with a lot of shame. It goes right back to that concept that we talked about before about I should be grateful. What the hell is wrong with me? And you're in this kind of spiral of you try to be grateful then you still feel empty. And then you feel guilty for not being grateful. And then you feel worse. And because you feel worse, then, you're like, okay, let's go back to gratitude again. But in the end, that gratitude idea just becomes another should, right? Another thing that during the process of trying to achieve the prize, you are really living in shame and frustration. But the fact of the matter is, you can be grateful and unfulfilled. Both can be true. If we adopt that and both idea, then you can realize you can be grateful for the career you have created. You can be grateful for how far you've gotten and all of those things. And you can acknowledge to yourself that you still feel unfulfilled. And that's okay, right? Most people don't get it right on the first try. I don't know where that idea became either. Like you get one choice in life, who says that? You get one time to choose what you are going to do. I mean, that just seems asinine now. When the average length, I think, of a person's employment these days is about 18 months. So why would we think, oh, I only get to choose the career one time and then I have to stick with it, or at least, again, these are things that I believed. I've got to stick with it. I may be able to change law firms or change the type of practice I do or whatever, but this is my thing and I've chosen it and I got to stick with it. But again, if I'm feeling empty and happiness is not living in the process of what I'm experiencing, then it's probably not what I should be doing. Like I ought to pursue or at least begin to explore what else, right, what other evolution might be waiting for me. I've had so many people over the years, again, talk about, you gave up on this or you quit doing that in order to pursue this. And now what I believe is that, no, I didn't quit any of those things. I evolved beyond it. I learned what I needed to learn from it, and then I allowed myself to move on, right? I don't have a sentence, right? I am not in a prison. I do not have a sentence that I am required to stay in something that I know I've evolved past. So again, I think if you're having that feeling of guilt, right, of wanting to experience happiness and knowing that it doesn't exist exactly where you are right now, that, the guilt may come and be there, but the fact of the matter is, what if we just have gratitude for the realization that something else is on the horizon? What if we just begin, instead of having shame, we have curiosity of wow, happiness is no longer living in this process. I've evolved past it. So I'm curious, what is next? How am I going to build upon this? What I've learned in this section of my life, in this time in my life. And that although things may look like a significant pivot to the left or to the right, life isn't linear like that. It's not always going to make sense until you're well past, right, the time and able to look backwards and be able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together to know, oh, this is why I did this first. This is why I did this second. This is why I did this third. Instead, oftentimes you have to just take that leap, right? And trust yourself and follow your own intuition and realize that if you truly are committed to your own evolution and your own sense of becoming and the creation of your own happiness, because frankly, nobody else is responsible for it except for you, then you want to allow yourself to change. You want to allow yourself to look for what's next and not just simply force yourself to stay until you've gotten to whatever prize that you deem is required for you to move on to the second stage. So I hope that you'll let go of that guilt and realize that you can have both, right? The gratitude and lack of fulfillment, and be grateful for what you learned there and realize you were unfulfilled and need to move forward. So my next kind of thought and question is, what were we really chasing when we were in pursuit of the prize, or when we are in pursuit of the prize? I mentioned it on the first episode, but almost by the grace of God, I have 10 years of sobriety. And what I really realized that my achievement or my pursuit of achievement and these prizes, it was just a coping mechanism all along, right? It follows, actually, if you pay attention to it, patterns of addiction, right? Highs and lows and crashes. I need more of it. I want more dopamine. I want more spikes. I need bigger wins to feel like things are great. I was using these, prizes as my way of numbing myself, right? Because I didn't like all the rest of the stuff. I didn't enjoy the day-to-day. I didn't enjoy any of the process, but I would wait and withhold until I could get that fix of the prize, of the recognition, and of the feeling of the high, and hope that that high was big enough for me to last to the next prize. But what was I really running toward or away from is the question that I really needed to think about. Why was I in pursuit of, something in the first place, right? What was I trying to gain from that prize that I felt like I didn't have on the day-to-day basis? Well, what I felt like I didn't have was value, to be honest, right? My value really came from my achievements, right? That Gold stars meant I was loved more. Performance meant I had a feeling of belonging. So I just kept performing, even though it was really detrimental to my own mental health, my physical health. And I was doing it long after anybody was grading me. I didn't realize that. But again, I was in that pattern so deep that I had never pulled out to say, hey, is there something bigger going on? Let me take a pause here and realize, I had never heard that work could be something that follows a sense of flow and comes with a feeling of ease, and that at the conclusion of a day, you could actually feel excited. So I didn't know these things. Instead, I just stuck with all of the old patterns, the old operating system that I had been under for so long. And I just continued to chase the feeling of love and belonging and value. I didn't know at all how to cultivate it within myself. And I frankly didn't know that you could feel those feelings on a regular basis. And so I guess my question to you would be, if you're in the same pattern, if you've been chasing the prize and not enjoying the happiness that comes in the process, what are you really chasing? Are there feelings that you're chasing like I was? Are you pursuing a promotion so that you can feel like you finally matter? Are you pursuing external recognition because your internal cup feels empty? I learned in AA long ago that, at the end of the day, there was a hole in my soul that I was just filling with alcohol, and that I could actually fill that hole with a whole lot of other much more beneficial things like spirituality, like love, like unconditional love, happiness, all of these things. But those were not skills that I had developed. I had really only developed these achievement-based skills. And so if you're also feeling like you're running and chasing and exhausted and only waiting for the happiness or the experience of happiness when you get to the prize, maybe you're like me. Maybe that you have felt that happiness or love or, value isn't felt until you achieve the prize. And I am wholeheartedly here to say that is not true. That you have value today, that you have value not at all dependent on whether or not you hit some goal. You have value to add to this world. And maybe you're not feeling it right now, just in the same way that I didn't feel it because I wasn't following my path. I wasn't following what lit me up. And so I really couldn't feel it because I wasn't feeling the rewards of doing the things that I was meant to do. So look at some of those feelings and try to think about how you want to feel daily, and know that all of that is waiting for you just as soon as you're willing to do the uncomfortable work of pausing, right? God, even that was scary for me. Like, what if one day I took off from chasing and running as hard as I possibly can? Like, would the world fall apart? Would I never reach my goals then? I was terrified. But, maybe this is just your permission slip to slow down for a day and think about, what is it that you're chasing? And if you got there tomorrow, how long would that feeling of a high last? And would it be worth it to you? Maybe it is. I don't know. But I know for myself, it wasn't worth it because that high never lasted. I had to learn, again, that waiting for that end destination was never going to leave me with the fulfillment that I desperately craved. So there are different types of success also. There's success that impresses and then there is success that fulfills. As I was coaching for many years, I realized that for me, the definition of success that fulfills came with two really critical things. I had to have income and impact. And when I was only in pursuit of one or the other and never and both, then I didn't feel that feeling of fulfillment. It really all drilled down to that. When I look back at practicing law, I was in pursuit of income, not impact. When I was running that sales team and always trying to stay in the top 10 of 40,000, I was definitely not thinking about impact. I was only pursuing income and I'll say recognition. But when I have both, or let's talk about when you just have impact and not income, right? You're helping others, but it is to the detriment of yourself, meaning there is no financial reward for you. Then you're creating a situation where there is a win-lose relationship, right? The other party gets the impact, but you don't get anything, right? So yes, you get the feeling of fulfillment. I get all of that. You get that reward, but at the end of the day, you want to be also equally impacted for the type of sacrifice and the things that you're putting in. And so I realized that both of those things need to exist in a working relationship. I'm not saying in a, giving, loving relationship. I'm talking about work. So that I need those two things. And if I'm only asked to pursue something just because it will make me money, I cannot do it. I can't, because I've been down that road way too many times. And if it's only income I'm after, I will hit that destination. It does not matter how much amount of money that I am promised at the end of it. It will never feel like enough because of what I sacrificed along the way to get there. So it doesn't matter if they're promising you $1 million. I swear you will get to the end and think, that's all there is. What? That feeling of high only lasted this long. And it's so draining and frustrating. So there is extrinsic success and then there's intrinsic success. So let's talk about the two kinds of success. There's wealth, status, fame, appearance, external validation. All of those are extrinsic. And we've talked a lot about that in this episode. So the external success versus the internal. And the intrinsic is the feelings of growth, the feeling of relationships that you've developed, contributions, health, meaning. Those are all intrinsic feelings of success. And at the end of the day, doesn't matter how many of the external successes that you were capable of collecting if you don't have any of the intrinsic ones. Because the research is super clear that people focused on intrinsic goals have a higher life satisfaction, period. And people focused only on extrinsic goals have more anxiety and less fulfillment. So the research backs up everything that we've been talking about today. That if you're only focused on the prize, you're probably going to end up with a feeling of more anxiety and less fulfillment. If you're focused on the development of happiness in the process, then you're going to have a higher life satisfaction. So what are the three things that we actually need? This is called the self-determination theory. 3 things that we actually need in order to feel fulfilled. Autonomy. So we need to direct our own life, right? To me, that's letting go of the shackles of everyone saying that you should do it this way. Competence, feeling effective at what matters to you. So again, if you're going against the grain of what feels organic and like it is developing that internal part of yourself that wants to grow, then you're probably not going to feel that effective at it, right? or you're going to feel effective at what matters to someone else. Maybe not effective at what matters to you. And that is really important. Feeling effective about what matters most to only you. And then relatedness, like a genuine connection to others. So when we have that genuine connection to other people, we can actually feel this sense of self and autonomy and excitement. So the gut check kind of question to ask yourself or to think through is, you might be respected, but not excited, wealthy, but not free, successful, but living someone else's life. And that's what you want to think through in this big overarching question, is that, am I living to create success that impresses or success that fulfills? Am I respected but not excited? Am I wealthy but I don't feel free to make choices about what I want to do on a day in, day out basis? I can't change things. I can't make anything different. Or do I feel successful but I feel like I'm living someone else's life? Boy, I felt that. I had to put on a mask, it felt like, just to get out of bed and go and do the things that I was known to be very good at doing. But what they didn't realize is at the end of the day, I would fall back in bed and just be absolutely burnt out, exhausted, because it didn't feel like a role I was supposed to be playing. So what other people don't tell you about the other side of success, right? About this feeling of success that comes with emptiness, is that when you are following someone else's path, or when you reach that prize, it can actually feel really isolating, because you don't want to tell anybody you feel guilty. I mean, you don't want to tell anyone else that you don't feel that sense of gratitude. You feel guilt instead, that you feel that sense of shame for, whatever it is that you have, because you don't feel that grateful for it. Fewer people, understand you, or you feel as though fewer people understand you, or that there are fewer people that you can be honest with. And again, that further drives the sense of loneliness. Or maybe you say to yourself, I have everything I've ever wanted, and yet I am still miserable. And that is not a very safe thing to say out loud to most people, right? I can see in Starbucks, I'm grabbing my coffee and my friend's like, hey, how are you? And I'm like, instead of just fine, right? The required answer 99% of the time, I'm like, I have everything I've ever wanted and I am completely miserable. Maybe I should have tried that a few times and I probably would have felt a little less alone, but probably scared the shit out of the other person I was talking to as well. So, on that side of success, when you are pursuing, the success just for the prize, it does come with all of this other side of things that most people are not talking about. They only end up focusing on those external things that you get. Have you ever noticed that? There is not a lot of discussion of the level of loneliness that you feel, or again, the shame, because everybody else seems to be fine, but there must be something wrong with me for not feeling this immense feeling of gratitude that I reached the goal or that I now have the prize. And the truth is, it is a very predictable outcome that each time you pursue the external success to the exclusion of what you internally desire, that you will feel this level of emptiness. I love Brene Brown says, we hustle for our worthiness rather than standing in it. And boy, isn't that true? I mean, I'm willing to hustle for it so that I can have that feeling of worthiness for 48 hours, but I won't stand in my worthiness every single day and just make decisions from that place. I hold off on it and then wait until I get to a place, and then I'm worthy, and then I just do the same dance all over again. So The emptiness, if you've ever felt that when you've hit this goal and gotten this prize, does not mean you are broken. It's just proof that you're actually beginning to awaken to the fact that this dance is no longer working for you, right? This cycle of continuing to pursue external success to the detriment of how you feel on the inside, it ain't it anymore, right? You've got to begin to find the happiness in the process and not the prize. That your body is craving that your soul is craving that. So what do? Right? Now that we've awakened to it, we know that there are two sides to success. We know that, reaching that mountaintop doesn't have to be hard and it shouldn't be miserable. Then what do we do now? And it is not about abandoning your ambition at all. I do consider myself still ambitious, but it is about realigning your ambition to who you really are internally and making sure that, the external success mirrors exactly how you feel on the inside and not having these as two separate things. The new definition of success can be moving forward from this day. It can be work that excites you, not just impresses others. To me, that's the ultimate goal. Like where we go from here is that we're seeking work that excites us. And that it is not based on whether or not we think that will result in an achievement that impresses somebody else. And what I hope that you begin to feel as a result of those things is that you begin to feel the energy that life can give you and the freedom that will come with it, not just a paycheck, not just that income, but the freedom and that feeling of impact, right? That you're going to feel when you let go of that other path and what anybody else thinks. And then you're going to have joy, right? You're going to have space for things that make you feel alive because you're going to be curious about what all of those things are now. You're not going to just, accept what is, but you're going to look for what you want things to be. And so maybe from here you sit with the question of what am I hungry for? Not what looks impressive to other people, but what genuinely would nourish me, right? The emptiness that you may have felt before is not the end of your story. And it does not mean you're broken. It means that you are ready to begin a new story. And the fact that you even at some point hopefully have asked the question, is this it? Or if you haven't even gotten there yet, but you are in that phase of sacrificing all of your happiness on a daily basis, hoping that when you get to the prize, you will feel good, that you now know to ask the question, what am I hungry for? And is this it? Is this what I'm hungry for? And when you ask those questions, it means that you are meant for more, that you are ready to receive more, you're ready to do more. And no, I am not talking about more achievement. I mean more alignment, more feeling of flow on a regular basis, on a daily basis, because that can be achieved. So ask yourself this week or today, just start with the day. What am I actually hungry for? What is it that I want to feel? What I hope that you take away from today is if you've ever hit a goal and felt nothing or worse, felt empty, you are not broken. You're not ungrateful. You're waking up to the truth that achievement isn't the same thing as fulfillment. It's just a fact. The goalpost for you will always move. The treadmill will always keep running. There will always be that next goal. The question isn't, how do I achieve more? It's what would actually fill me up as soon as you realize that prize didn't do it. And that answer, it's not out there. It's not in the ether. It's not something that someone else can answer for you. Lord knows I cannot answer it for you. It is in here. It is in you. So here's my invitation for you this week. Ask yourself, just what am I actually hungry for? Not what looks good, not what checks a box, what would genuinely nourish you this week. And you don't have to have the answer right away. In fact, I think it's probably going to first not come. I think first you're going to feel uncomfortable as hell asking the question in the first place and feeling like it's a waste of your time. But we'll get into that later. So just sit with the question. Don't force yourself to have an answer, but be curious. All you have to do, I didn't say you have to answer the question. All you have to do is ask it. And then next week, we're going somewhere uncomfortable. We're going to ask, why am I so afraid of being seen as I really am? And what am I really hiding? Like, why am I hiding all of this? Why am I trying to find what makes me look successful to other people? And if you have ever self-sabotaged right before you've had a major breakthrough, which I've done many, many times, I've gotten sick, I have, invested in the wrong things. I've done all kinds of things, missteps right before a breakthrough. And you heard that voice, who do you think you are? We are going to dive deep into that one next time. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work alongside me. And remember, the emptiness isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of your new one. And I can't wait to see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Sallie Ogden Show. I will see you next time.